country.
This week we have legendary comedian Jim Breuer from Saturday Night Live, back in the days when it was still funny. It's not a mask that he was wearing this weekend, though. I think it's a muzzle.
If he did that once in my house, go, you all right, man? Because it's a little weird the way you slipped in. Did you see the kid felt a little uncomfortable?
We learned that the Obama-Biden administration weaponized the intelligence community to take down the incoming Trump administration.
I just feel like the president has done everything with all of his heart. And when he does something, he gives all of it.
Democrats are really in for a big surprise in November.
And the Republican Party is all about individualism, and it's about freedom.
We see these promises made and promises kept.
For Hispanics from every corner of this hemisphere, they recognize that President Trump is not only willing to stand up and fight for freedom and democracy, but he is also willing to stand up to despots and dictators.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
I understand the pain that people are feeling. The death of George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis was a grave tragedy. It should never have happened. It has filled Americans all over the country with horror, anger, and grief. We support the right of peaceful protesters, and we hear their pleas. The voices of law-abiding citizens must be heard, and heard very loudly. We will stand with the family of George Floyd, with the peaceful protesters, and with every law-abiding citizen who wants decency, civility, safety, and security. But what we are now seeing on the streets of our cities has nothing to do with justice or with peace. The memory of George Floyd is being dishonored by rioters, looters, and anarchists. The violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs.
Did this for no reason.
The mobs are devastating the life's work of good people and destroying their dreams.
That worked so hard to get here. So hard.
It harms those who have the least. We cannot and must not allow a small group of criminals and vandals to wreck our cities and lay waste to our communities. We must defend the rights of every citizen to live without violence, prejudice, or fear. Healing, not hatred, justice, not chaos, are the mission at hand. I stand before you as a friend and ally to every American seeking justice and peace. No one is more upset than fellow law enforcement officers by the small handful who fail to abide by their oath to serve and protect. We support the overwhelming majority of police officers who are incredible in every way and devoted public servants. We must all work together as a society to expand opportunity and to create a future of greater dignity and promise for all of our people. Every citizen in every community has the right to be safe in their workplace, safe in their homes, and safe in our city streets. We are working toward a more just society, but that means building up, not tearing down, joining hands, not hurling fists, standing in solidarity, not surrendering to hostility. This is the sacred right of all Americans that I am totally determined to defend and will defend.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Black Voices for Trump, Real Talk on Team Trump Online. I'm Katrina Pierson, and tonight we're joined by Democrat from Georgia, State Representative Vernon Jones, and Senior RNC Communications Advisor Dennard. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. The recent job numbers have far exceeded expectations for the month of May, and the United States gained over 2.5 million jobs, and that's the largest gain for a single month in our history. Even with half of the country shut down, President Trump's policies are still working. And I want to get the both of your reactions to this great jobs report. Paris, let's start with you.
You know, Katrina, first of all, thank you for having me on the show tonight. This is a tremendous achievement for the president, but it's even better for the American people. With the job numbers coming out today, there were estimates that unemployment was going to be upwards of 20% or more. The unemployment number was 13.3%. 13.3% is still high, but we have to put it into context of where we are as a nation. The president essentially had to shut off the economy to save lives. More specifically, he had to save Black American lives that were disproportionately impacted by the global pandemic that we call COVID-19. So even in the face of COVID-19, the economy being shut off, the economy itself, the fundamentals, the foundation that President Trump's leadership has echoed into this new generation of wealth creation and lowering unemployment numbers for the Black community specifically, record lows that we've seen in recorded history. The economy is showing signs of not only improvement, but it shows that we are going to come back after COVID-19 is taken care of even stronger than ever. This is positive news for the American people, for the American worker, and every Black small business owner in America. Help is coming. Help is actually here. And the economy is responding to President Trump's inclusive economy. It's really exciting news.
Yeah, it is exciting news. And when you think about it, you know, there are a lot of states, big states, like California, like New York, who aren't even open yet. So we know the numbers are just going to continue to get better from here. And that brings me to you, Representative Jones. You know, let's talk about the differences between the blue states and the red states, for example. You know, Paris and I are Black. Republicans, so we're not supposed to exist as is, but we also support Trump. You are a Black Democrat and supports Trump, and that's sort of an anomaly. You actually take some of the pressure off of us now. But I want people to hear from you, because there's a lot of people who view this program who may not know who you are. But I do want to get into the differences of governance when it comes to blue states versus red. So take this opportunity to tell our viewers who you are and why you support President Trump.
Well, first of all, I'm an American, obviously, and I'm Black, and that's irrelevant in terms of what the president is doing for this country, because he's leaving no race behind, no gender behind, no one behind. Everybody has benefited from this president and what he's brought in the past 3.5 years. And as you recall, prior to the pandemic, there was record numbers of unemployment across the board, and certainly for African Americans. Small businesses were on the grow, on the move. Many of them had started new businesses in terms of minority participation in small businesses. You saw a lot of the tax breaks. A lot of those things that the president put into place has really had a profound impact even now. And so this president wears a number of different hats. Obviously, he's a chief executive officer, but he's been the chief jobs officer. He's been the chief health officer, because he struck a good balance between providing quality health, listening to the science, listening to his public health officials, and making sure each and every American was safe. But at the same time, this president has been adamant, and I agree with him, most of us agree with him, that we have to have economic recovery. And he has done the right things in the past to sustain us. Can you imagine if his policies were not in place and we were hit with this type of pandemic crisis? So this president is on the right track. That's why I like him, because he's not your normal politician. He's been vetted in the private sector. He knows jobs, he knows government, he knows how to make things happen in the private sector. He's brought those skills to the Oval Office, which we haven't had that type of chief executive in many years. And so I'm not surprised by the economy. Now, let me say this. I am a Democrat, and I come from a southern state. I have conservative leanings. I was reared that way, like most African Americans were reared until they were hijacked by the left. But let me say this. This president does three things. He does what he says he's going to do. He provides results. And you know what? If you can't get the job done, he gets you out the way and finds someone else who can, so we can get this economy and this country moving forward. And he puts America first. If you want to call him a nationalist, call me a nationalist too, because I want to put America first. When you start putting illegals and other interest groups or foreign groups before foreign countries, before the American people in our own country, I totally disagree with that. And so this is the first time in my lifetime we've had a president that put America first.
Yeah, I mean, you say that so well. And, you know, I just want to commend you for your courage and leadership, because it was not easy to put everything out there to support, you know, what is right for you and really what is right for the Black community. So, you know, we commend you for that. And, you know, Paris, we know that there are a lot of issues, and it's not just jobs that we're talking about right now with regards to blue states and red states, whether it's taxes or regulations, homelessness. You know, there's a reason why so many people flee from states like California and go to Texas, or flee from New York and go to Florida. There's a reason for that. But every problem that we're talking about right now heavily impacts Black America more than most. So Paris, what do you say the differences are and how that impacts the different communities?
You know, Katrina, it's really important for us not to miss the historic nature of what Representative Jones just said. He said, I'm a Black Democrat. I'm an American first. And he said, when he first came out and talked about why he supported President Trump, he said, I'm going to remain a Democrat and I'm going to remain committed to my community. It reminded me of what my grandfather, who happens to, my grandfather, Walter John Richard Dennard was his name. He was my hero. He comes from Cordele, Georgia. That's where my family's roots are, which are several hundred miles, you know, south of Atlanta. And I was talking to Representative Jones about our connection to Georgia, him being a representative from there, my family having roots there, conservative family values type roots that you find in a lot of Southern Black communities and Black families. But the important thing that my grandfather told me, he said, Paris, stay in your party. He frankly said, I don't like your then president and I don't like your party, but I love you, Paris, and I love you in your party. Stay in the party, because he knew that the Black community needed to have representation and our voices heard on both sides of the aisle. So to have Representative Jones, with his leadership, with his influence, come out and highlight that even in places that have Democrat strongholds in terms of Democrat governors or Democrat mayors, it's okay to be a Democrat and understand the impact of what this president is doing. And that is to your point and to your question, Katrina, about the differences. The differences come from leadership. The differences come in philosophy and how to govern. It's about empowering people. It's about providing opportunity. And when you look at the Democrat mayors, unfortunately, that are presiding over a lot of the rioting and the looting that's going on in these Black communities across the country right now in response to the tragic, horrific, and unjustifiable death of George Floyd, they are not doing the community any service by allowing or not following a strong hand to restore law and order to protect the small businesses that were built by Black communities. It's about Black wealth. It's about Black lives. It's about justice. It's about economic freedom. And these Democrats, unfortunately, have let the community down for not only months, not only years, but in the case of Joe Biden, it's been 44 years. But in many of these communities that we talk about, it's been generations. The time has come for change, and the time has come for action. And I believe, like Representative Jones believes, that the person who can deliver that action for the community, for the nation, is Donald Trump.
Well, you know, and I want to get to more about the local leadership and the riots a little bit later, but circling back to you, Representative Jones, let's talk about Georgia, because, you know, far too often we group people by their party, Republicans versus Democrats, but there are some Democrats like yourself out there who have been fighting for the community, who have implemented and spearheaded policies. So what is it about Georgia that's attracting so many people, and what is that message that you're taking on the road?
Well, one of the things you can say about Georgia, we're unique here. We recognize that people are different shapes, colors, orientation, but leadership is more important than anything else. We've had past good leadership where Georgia has been a job creator. We've been open to businesses moving here. We've been open to small businesses getting started and providing them the tax incentives and other types of incentives. So not only they can start the business, but grow the business. So Georgia's been attractive. As a matter of fact, we've invested in our infrastructure, water and sewer, roads, etc., and providing a climate where the regulations are less here, where people want to come here. The fees are less. Many of the taxes are lower here than many other places. You have them come from California and other places where they've been literally taxed out. They can't afford it anymore. So you can come to Georgia for a quality of life. I will say this, when having run a government and been the chief executive officer of a large urban county, I can tell you that local leadership is extremely important though. And I happen to be a Democrat. I didn't leave the party left me. But those fiscal conservative policies, recognizing how important it is to have less regulation so businesses can thrive, so governments and the people at large can benefit from that. That's having a plan. And Georgia, as you know, led the nation the past several years as being the #1 place to do business. And we're keeping that going with our current governor, Governor Brian Kemp. That's why Georgia was one of the first ones, although criticized earlier, the others are following, where our governor took the lead and said, you know what, we're going to take the necessary precautions. We've educated our people on what they need to remain safe. But at the same time, he recognized that we have to have an economic recovery here because the government coffers are falling well short. And what's going to happen when you don't have money? You go back to the people and raise taxes. Well, they haven't been working in the past few months. So you know, why are you going to do that? So he is really striking and has struck a good balance, like the president had, in terms of providing that, getting back, taking care of our public health situation, making sure people are safe, their lives are being saved, but at the same time, opening the doors for businesses so people can go back to work, so we can get back to somewhat of a normal life. But I can tell you this, when you see some of the events that have occurred, and I know you're going to get into this later, but in terms of protesting, the local governments are the ones who are responsible initially for keeping law and order. But you can't on one hand say, you can't make a political decision based on public health and public safety. If you tell a restaurant you have 11 or more people in there, we're going to crack down on you. But you have the masses of people that are marching, and you say, okay, y'all go ahead and march peacefully. I mean, they don't march peacefully, but where are they being removed? They're violating code. So it's, you know, it's more of a political decision based on the issues of public health and at the same time economic recovery. And so and public safety. So I just say, you know, we have good leadership, certainly from our governor, but the local governments are the ones that should be asking the state government for support. And then they also can make the call to the federal government. It goes from the bottom up, not from the top down. And so I wish the president, I open the president to come and bring whatever resources he can to Georgia. That's important. But if there's local politics involved with national politics, and one is trying to outdo the other because of the election, then the people are going to be the one that's going to suffer. We need that state and national support here. And I hope our leaders on the local level recognize that and keep the politics out of it.
You know, Katrina.
Absolutely. You know, before we get on to our next topic, Paris, I want to bring you in on one last thing because, you know, Joe Biden is out there claiming that he's going to win, you know, Georgia, Michigan, two states that President Trump carried in 2016. But what can other Republican candidates do to win over individuals like Representative Jones' constituents?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Katrina, it comes down to the facts. And it comes down to really knowing the record of President Trump and comparing it to that of Joe Biden. Joe Biden said in that now infamous interview with Charlemagne the God, examine my record, man. I think that's exactly how he said it. Examine my record, man. So let's do that. Let's have the conversation. Let's examine records. You want to talk about education. Let's look at historically Black colleges and universities. Unprecedented support by this president, permanently funding for 10 years Title III Part F, billions of dollars for HBCUs, first time that's ever been done in history. President Obama had a chance to do it for 8 years and failed to do it. Matter of fact, President Obama, while vice president was there, if he was caring about the Black community, he was wanting to fight for the Black community, why didn't he stop the administration that he was a part of from cutting funding from the first budget of President Obama? He sat there silently. When you look at the issue of school choice, and which is something that I know very important to states like Georgia and the Governor Kemp and many other states, but it's also very important to the Black community because we feel that you should not have to be put in a bad school just because of your zip code. It's about opportunity and it's about freedom, educational freedom, and giving parents the choice to place their child in a better school. President Trump has supported that. Vice President Biden has said that one of the first things he was going to do is get rid of charter schools. He's not your school choice president like President Trump is. And most importantly, when you want to compare and talk about records, I would encourage people to look at the record on justice and criminal justice reform. You have one candidate that was talking about, the issue of mass incarceration, the issue of locking up Black people for years, destroying Black community, destroying the Black family, destroying Black generational wealth. That person was Joe Biden, the architect of the 1994 crime bill, also the architect of the unfair crack cocaine sentencing, which also led to mass incarceration for Black people. This is a man who has not been on the side of the Black community when it comes to law and justice. Matter of fact, Charlemagne the God said Joe Biden was at the front lines of mass incarceration. And so you look at the contrast with President Trump, who has been a champion for criminal justice reform, who sought to undo the damage done by the 94 bill. Joe Biden had ample opportunity, ample time to be a hero, to be a champion, to fight for the Black community. He's been in office for 44 years and has spent several months in his basement in Delaware and has yet to lead. President Trump, the record is very clear on his leadership as it relates to the Black community, on education, on the economy, and most importantly right now on the issue of justice and criminal justice reform. The facts will be the guide to help educate any mind on the left or the right, but especially to those that consider themselves to be Democrat or consider themselves to be open to giving the president and the Republican Party a first look or a second look. You have to examine the facts and the records of Joe Biden and Donald J. Trump.
Well, Representative, what do you think? Is that the solution? Do you have anything to add, or is Paris wrong?
Well, obviously he's correct in every category, and a footnote to that, you have to call this president really the modern, if you will, civil rights president since going back to Lyndon Baines Johnson. Why? Because his policies have directed in a positive way, have directly impact and help the African American community. Although he's helped every demographic, but clearly, when can we say in the last few years there's been a Black agenda? This president, President Trump, has come to Washington with a Black agenda. He has come with a people's agenda, but as a subset to that, there's been an African American agenda. He mentioned through Opportunity Zone districts, obviously historical Black colleges, which I'm a proud graduate of North Carolina Central University. He's helping my alma mater, certainly through prison reform, but job opportunities as well. And I can tell you this, if what I'm hearing is correct, and this president comes through with the Civil Rights Act of 2020, he'll be the greatest president in African American communities going back to Abraham Lincoln. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but history will be on his side when people become woke and see that who really helped African Americans. It was Donald J. Trump. And so this president is providing the type of leadership that we've been asking for years. You know where he's coming from. He's a straight shooter. People say they want honest politicians. No, they don't, because President Trump has been as open, as honest as anybody has. You know, he said he's going to do when he does what he said he's going to do. And so the liberal media obviously has, they feel like the Black community is a captive audience. So does Joe Biden, so does the Democratic Party. And that's why I'm calling them out now for their bigotry, because you're right. We have Black African Americans that have been on the side of Joe Biden, but Joe Biden and the Democratic Party has not been on the side of Black people. And more and more of us out there feeling that way. We're just afraid maybe in some circles to be attacked by the liberal media, or they send out their agent provocateurs to try to keep Black people on the plantation. The choice is clear here. You can ask anybody right now, what has President Trump done? And they cannot disagree with you on those issues that we just talked about: prison reform, the economic development in terms of economic opportunities, in terms of jobs, and also historical black colleges. But if you ask anybody right now, well, what did Joe Biden do? Anybody black or white, really? But ask an African American, what has Joe Biden done in almost past 49 years that has really had an impact on the African American community, other than displacing them from their families, destroying their lives, taking them from their children and their mothers and their fathers, and incarcerating them where the time does not fit the crime? That's Joe primetime Biden that we need to be highlighting. And so the black people have been really disillusioned about the Democratic Party. And that's what scared those liberals. That's why they're horrified, because people like me and you all have come out and said, wait a minute, we're not just going to be a part of the bandwagon. We are independent thinkers. We don't need liberals thinking for us, wanting to build us a habitat house, but not in their neighborhoods. We want true economic power, and Donald J. Trump has provided us for the first time a seat at the table where we can be a part of this pie splitting. So that's why I support this president.
Yeah, you know, you're absolutely right, Representative. You mentioned the media, and it's so interesting to me because all through 2016, no one in the press asked candidate Donald Trump what his plan for Black America was. But once he got elected, he literally built out this entire system of change, generational change for the Black community. But all of a sudden today, you know, they're making all these demands. What is your agenda for the Black community? And, you know, for us, it's just like, well, where have you been? Are you not paying attention? And I think it is interesting that they're now questioning like this systemic racism, when what they should be doing is asking Joe Biden what his plan is to end systemic racism, simply because he was the one on the front lines who helped implement and maintain for over 40 years systemic racism that we see a lot inside Democrat-run communities. So gentlemen, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll move on to our next topic.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black, and you ain't black, and you ain't black, and you ain't black.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
Mass incarceration has put hundreds of thousands behind bars for minor offenses. Joe Biden wrote those laws.
Every major crime bill that's come out of this Congress has had the name Joe Biden on that bill. We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
Joe Biden's policies destroyed millions of black lives. Joe Biden may not remember, but we do.
Thanks to President Trump, criminal justice reform gave nonviolent offenders a second chance at life and the American dream.
His policies have created 9,000 opportunity zones that will impact 35 million people in struggling communities.
Criminal justice reform gave nonviolent offenders a second chance at life and the American dream.
He has given $100 million to HBCUs for scholarships and research.
He fights against illegal immigration, a plague that has salvaged the black community.
And he has done all of this for us in less than one term. Imagine what he can achieve with 4 more years.
And welcome back to Black Voices for Trump Real Talk. I'm with Vernon Jones and Paris Dennard. You know, we just ended the last segment talking about Joe Biden actually being one of the leaders of creating and implementing systemic racism that so many Black Democrats are really speaking about loudly today. And Representative Jones, did you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, you said something very interesting earlier about the Black agenda. Here's what's interesting. Now, African American can deny this. When President Obama was running for president, and Travis Smiley and others were saying, what about Poor People's Campaign? What about black people? What are you going to do for black people? There were these celebrities and others that was telling Tavis and me and you and others, don't ask him anything about that. Let him get elected first. Then he could do something. Don't mess up. Well, he gets elected. Then we start asking him about the black agenda. Oh, well, wait a minute. Don't mess with him right now. Let him get reelected. Well, he gets reelected. Now, in the past 8 years, can anybody really point to the black agenda during the Obama years? And clearly, Joe Biden was there. Where was the black agenda? But here's President Trump. He comes in, and he came out of nowhere. He was literally the dark horse. And all of a sudden, he's the president, and he has a black agenda. When blacks should be getting on board and give him more input and more assistance on helping develop that black agenda. He's literally been carried out on or getting information from you and Harris and others. But, you know, what about this whole country? What if all of us got on board with the black agenda with this president and stopped trying to fight this president for the Democrats, just so the Democrats can win? And it's so ironic. Even during the presidential debate among the Democrats, where was the black agenda? We heard about the illegal agenda. We heard about the gay and lesbian equality agenda. We heard about all these other special interest agenda. But where was the black agenda? There was no black agenda. Why? Because they believe that we're a captive audience. And if you're black, or I should say this, you ain't black unless you vote Democrat and vote for Joe Biden. Well, obviously, I am black. I am a Democrat, but I ain't voting for Joe Biden.
Well, that's so funny that you bring that up, Representative Jones, because a lot of people were asking me, was I offended as a black Republican? Was Katrina offended as a black Republican supporting President Trump when Joe Biden said you ain't black? I pointed out to people, not only was I offended as a black Republican, but I believe there were many black Democrats who were offended by that comment, because as Bob Johnson said, who's the founder of BET, he should spend the rest of his time on the campaign trail apologizing to every black person that he meets because it was so offensive. It was offensive because it says that you do not have a connection to your community if you are a free thinker, if you have an independent mind. You've got to fit inside the box that I prescribe for you as Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. So it's offensive to all the people that consider themselves to be free thinkers and independent minded that may not just want to be riding with Joe Biden. The black Democrats who were supporting Bernie Sanders or supporting Amy Klobuchar or supporting Cory Booker or Kamala Harris, they too were offended by that comment. But I also think it was a term of voter suppression, because Joe Biden and the Democrats know that because of the record that you've been talking about, because of the agenda that you and Katrina have been mentioning, for the black people, the black community specifically, it is making inroads. It's making a connection with the black community, and they have to stop it at all costs, even going so far as to call you out of your name and to say that you have no connection to your community and say you ain't black. They are running scared because this president has a black agenda. He's had one from day one, and he has one moving forward. And even in the middle of COVID-19, he has an agenda to address the black community to help mitigate the disproportionate impact that this has been having on our community. And reminded me, the story that you told, Representative, reminded me of time when I was speaking at the NAACP's youth conference, and I was talking about the lack of black agenda for the Obama-Biden administration. And a leader in the NAACP from New York stood up and told me, we've got to give them cover. We've got to get them reelected and give him cover. Right now in 2020, I'm saying no more giving Democrats cover. No more calling what Joe Biden does gaffes. They're bigoted remarks. He has a racist history of legislation that has been hurting our community. No more cover for the Democrats. Let's call them out, and let's be honest about the record and the facts, and let's have an honest conversation about President Trump and his real agenda for the black community.
And you know, one other final point on that. Think about when Democrats, white Democrats, voted for Ronald Reagan. They were elevated. They were the Reagan Democrats. It was a good thing. It was a positive thing. Nobody attacked them. But black people start thinking independently. Black Democrats wanting to vote for a Republican president. All of a sudden, you know, there's outrage out there. How could he be? You ain't black if you vote for a Republican. That's the hypocrisy. In my own state of Georgia, Zell Miller was a Democrat. I served when he was governor. Zell Miller not only endorsed a Republican, President George W. Bush, but actually spoke at the national convention.
I was there.
I was attacked on him like it was an attack on me. Now, why is it a white Democrat can think independently, but a black Democrat can't think independently? And so, isn't it something? Just think about he spoke at the Republican National Convention, and it was hashtags cricket in Atlanta, crickets in Atlanta, in Georgia, and in the South, and among Democrats nationally. But wouldn't it be something when a black person or black people want to vote Democrat or want to be a part of a Republican convention, there's outrage, you're a sellout, you're this or you're that. That is the bigotry in the Democratic Party.
Well, Katrina, that's why I am so proud that we are able to have this program tonight and have Representative Jones on it. That's why I've been so proud to see State Representative Karen Wissett from Michigan and her leadership in the state, especially in Detroit, coming out and just being honest and having integrity about the politics of this nation. I know that those two, you, Representative Jones, especially as a black Democrat, have taken some very hard hits, personal hits, you, your family, your reputation, and it's wrong. But I am so proud to be with you on this program tonight with Katrina, because I believe you and Representative Wissett and others, so many others that I'm even communicating with, are now saying if they can stand proudly with President Trump, if they can be courageous to do it, not only is there a silent majority, but there's a vocal majority, and you're a part of it. And so I'm just so honored to be with you on this program tonight.
No, I agree. I do. Again, I can't say enough how much I appreciate your leadership, because there's been a vacuum in our community for so long. And, you know, I just could not wait to see the day that someone just stood up and said, this is enough. Because it didn't make sense. And, you know, for decades, it's just been the same thing over and over again. Many of the problems that the community is facing right now today can be undone in 1 or 2 election cycles. And it's unfortunate that, you know, we're having to go through, you know, all of this chaos just to get there. But I do think, Paris, you're right. This is definitely a turn for the black community. We have leadership like Representative Jones and others who are now stepping out and doing what's right for the community, not what's right to keep white liberals in power. And I think that speaks truth to what's happening today. So thank you, Representative, for joining us tonight. Before we get on to our next topic, let's just take a step back. I want to talk about this a little bit more, because we are seeing a lot going on inside of our communities, whether it's police brutality and this perceived systemic racism. You know, and I always tell people that, yes, racism exists, but it's not the only thing that contributes to failure. And a lot of people do use the color of their skin as an excuse to not advance in life, as an excuse to give up on their dreams, as an excuse for their own failures. And instead of taking on that personal accountability and that responsibility, it's just so much easier to blame it on race. I mean, all three of us come from very different backgrounds, very different political arenas. But at the same time, I would consider us all three relatively successful when you look at it. And we all had our own setbacks. We all had our own pitfalls. We call that life. Life is a journey. So I'd like to just take this opportunity to hear from both of you what your advice would be to other Black Americans who are now paying attention, who may find themselves in situations that seem helpless or hopeless, particularly when it comes to criminal justice reform, now that President Trump is giving everyone a second chance at the American dream. But obviously, race didn't hold us back. So, Paris, let's start with you. What is it about race that keeps people from wanting to break through and get out of that mental block and really understand that it's a thing, but it's not the thing?
Well, you know, Katrina, we are at a point in our society where people just throw around the word, he's a racist, she's a racist, and it's going to lose its sting. It's going to lose its power, because there are racists in the world. There is discrimination. We can't deny that. Right. But what we have to be strong and recognize that this is still the greatest country in the world. Even though slavery was a part of our founding, the forefathers, our founding fathers, had the wisdom to write into the Constitution an ability for us to right the wrong. And that's exactly what we were able to do. We have to understand that racism cannot define us. We cannot be gripped by fear. all these isms that they try to put on us to hold us down, to keep us locked up, to keep us down and in the gutter. Yeah. That's a part of oppression. But we have to be honest with ourselves and say, I'm going to trust in God. I'm going to have faith, and I'm going to look to the real history of our community. We are a community of overcomers. We are a community of strong, talented people who impact this nation like never before in politics, in culture. We are successful, and we have even more opportunities today to rise above. We have to start investing in ourselves. We have to start investing in our communities. We have to start supporting one another and growing the Black family, supporting the Black family, HBCUs, and the things that the president has done to invest and to support the Black community. That's how we grow out of this idea that this nation is just a racist nation that can only keep us down. I contend that when you look at the leadership and the success of Representative Jones, of a Black person on the Supreme Court, of somebody becoming a two-term president of the United States, don't let the left make you feel that racism is going to keep you from achieving. This is a great nation, and we have new millionaires and billionaires happening every single day because we are able to work and come together and achieve. That is the nature. That's our heritage. That's our blood. We are strong. Do not be defined by fear and the left's mentality that you have to be oppressed. We don't. We are victorious.
Representative, you're on the front lines, and you have to now particularly really explain your position. And how do you do that in your community?
Well, first of all, let me say this. I think you mentioned earlier we came from different backgrounds. I was born and reared on a farm in North Carolina, and Pierson and I were talking about it earlier. I've experienced an outhouse. I've experienced pumping water from a hand pump and toting the water in the house, if you will. I've experienced growing up in the household where both my parents were only third grade educated, that when I got to the fifth grade, they could not help me with my math. I didn't know they weren't educated because they made sure I did my homework, and they were bluffing their way through. My dad fought in World War II when, honestly, my dad had talked about his experience, how white soldiers, U.S. soldiers, would talk about to the German girls that Black soldiers had tails, that they were monkeys. But my dad came back to this country, and he said the greatest country on the earth is these United States. This country may not have been good to my dad, but my dad has been good to this country enough to know there's no other greater place than this United States of America. My mom had to wash clothes for white folks, and many of them were mostly liberals, believe it or not. And so we could have a way of some sort of quality life, and we can get a good education. I've been very fortunate in this country. Me, like many others, and a lot of success stories around the country, have African Americans that pull themselves up by the bootstrap. I remember my mom and my dad saying on many occasions, the only thing they want from the government was for it to get out of his way. They just want to provide for their family, maintain the Second Amendment and the First Amendment, if you will, not necessarily in that order. And so when I look now, the greatest stain on this country has been slavery. We have to admit that. We have to be open to that and acknowledge that. When they were bringing slaves from Africa, they thought they were headed to or headed on a journey, but really it was an adventure. And that journey didn't stop. I should say it was really, they thought they were coming on a destination, but it was really a journey. And that destination, they thought it was over then, but no, it continued. And so what I'm saying is that we have to sit down, and we're going to have open and honest discussions about this sin and how we get beyond that. Some call it truth and reconciliation. Let's own up to it. Let's accept it. Let's talk about it. The Jewish community talks about the Holocaust and what horrible experiences they experienced, and they won't let you forget about it either. That's important. And so we have to talk about it. We have to sit down and have that dialogue, not be afraid. Now, I don't need a group of Black people talking to a group of Black people because we're singing to the choir. We need to have Black and white and others to sit down at the table, and let's get past it. Let's talk it out. I can tell you this, being in the Democratic Party and voting for Democrats in a block the past 60 years has not helped the Black community. Why? Because they're still singing, "We shall overcome." So it takes more than that. It really takes really us reaching out and having that open and frank discussion about racism in this country.
Yeah, you know, Paris, we hear that all the time. And I mean, talking about it, we've been talking about it for years. And everyone says, oh, we should sit down and have discussions. I don't know anybody that, you know, disagrees with the representative about how bad slavery was. And, you know, and then Representative, you mentioned Jewish people, they talk about the Holocaust. I think the difference is the Jewish people didn't define themselves by the Holocaust. They grieved, they talked, and they moved on with their lives, whereas Black people define themselves by the 200 years of history. And so it's sort of like trapped, you know, through trauma in this sort of this conditioning. And so I think that's really the difference. I'm not quite sure what more talking about it's going to do. It's more about healing, which can only be done inside the community. But with that, gentlemen, let's move on to our next topic, because there's a lot going on in the last couple of weeks. And I want to talk about the tragic death of George Floyd, specifically what's going on surrounding it, because there are Americans all across the nation who've been protesting and demanding that justice be served, that I haven't heard anyone say otherwise. So unfortunately, we have others out there like Antifa who are serving their own purpose and using these protests to push the anarchist playbook out there. They've used it. They've gone out there. They've started chaos, riots. We've seen all the videos of them handing out bricks and, you know, just really wanting to cause a lot of devastation and destruction in these communities. And innocent people are being killed. Small businesses are being burned, and countless livelihoods have been hurt. And there's truly been a lack of leadership at the state and local level, which is what you mentioned, you know, in the onset of the program, Paris. And President Trump has already deployed the military in Washington and offered similar assistance to these state and local officials. And now we have a new poll from the Morning Consult that shows that an overwhelming support of 58% of voters support using the military to help these local officials control the riots. And that includes a big chunk of liberal-leaning voters. So why are some of these state and local leaders refusing that help, Paris?
You know, Katrina, we are in the 99 years ago this week was the anniversary of the Black Wall Street Tulsa riots, where they called it Black Wall Street because there were millions of dollars 99 years ago in this community in Tulsa. And a mob came and burned it down and destroyed Black generational wealth and the businesses that were there. And so it's just an eerie parallel to see us in a same situation, this time in multiple cities across the country. But we have Democrat mayors and governors who are refusing to stand with the sides of the peaceful protesters. We have these Democrat mayors and Democrat governors who are acting as if Black Lives Matter, but not when it comes to preventing the loss of life, not when it comes to preventing looting and rioting in Black businesses. I believe, to answer you specifically, Katrina, they are playing politics with the lives of Black Americans and Black businesses. And it takes leadership. I don't care if you don't like the fact that Donald Trump is the president. I don't care if you do not want to admit that he's right in terms of establishing law and order to keep the peace and to protect Black small businesses in America. You have an obligation to those who put you in office to protect them, to serve them, and to do what's right by them. And if the lives truly matter, put politics aside and be willing to work like Representative Jones has been doing, work with Republicans, work with this administration to get things done, provide safety, law, and order for the community. It's all about politics for these Democrat mayors, and that's unfortunate because this is a time where we need leadership, bipartisan leadership, to bring the nation together, to heal the nation, but to help the economy grow. And we know that has to happen, especially in these Black communities who are really, really hit hard right now.
Yeah, Representative Jones, you know, I was seeing on the news that there have been some historical buildings set on fire in the Atlanta area. Why aren't they using the resources available to stop anarchy?
Going back to your point and what I was talking about earlier about that local leadership, that's where it starts. Again, when you dial 911, it doesn't go to Washington, D.C. to the president's office. It goes to those local first responders, police and fire and rescue. Well, who governs those? It's the chief executive, the mayor, or if a large urban county executive. What was their security plan in terms of handling this protest that was going on? We saw what was happening in Minneapolis. Where was the local mayor with his police chief and his fire and rescue chief and other emergency management agencies, where they had a strategic plan that in the event something was going to happen in Atlanta, they could announce in advance, if you're going to have a march here, it's going to be peaceful, it's going to be at this location and this time. Again, you have these local mayors that are Democrat, these state governors who are Democrat, and they've made a political decision based on public safety and on public health. And when you look at that dichotomy, that is what is creating a lot of the issues, the confrontation. And don't forget what's hanging out there, what? The elections. So, you know, one party, and then primarily the Democratic Party, they want the president to fail. They want to blame these local riotings on the president when all he's trying to do is step in because they're not doing their job. But it's almost as if the liberal media and others, they want these protests to take place. You would think that those local mayors, with the surrounding support of local law enforcement agencies, would have had a plan in place, a comprehensive plan, that in the event that things start to happen, they could execute those plans. You don't hold a press conference during the middle of a riot and say, hey, this is what we need to be doing, y'all need to go home. Well, first of all, most of the people who should be going home are not watching TV. And so that's why the announcement should have been made in advance of the march. Here's what the parameters are going to be. We're going to protect the peaceful protesters, but those who get out of line, you're going to be handled swiftly with the criminal justice system. And you have on call and on hold right there for you, the National Guard and the President's office. It's from the bottom to the top, that relationship. But unfortunately, because this election is hanging out there, you have Democrats who are literally trying at the local and the state level to do what? To defy the president, hurt his chance of getting reelected. But that dog won't hunt, because everything they've thrown at him, he's been able to overcome it. He's going to overcome this too, and our country's going to get back together. And come November, we're going to elect Donald J. Trump again. You can be assured of that, because he's a strong leader.
And with that, we're going to take our last break. Stay right there, and we'll be right back.
I'm free to hug my family. I'm free to start over. This is the greatest day of my life. My heart is just bursting with gratitude. I want to thank President Donald John Trump. Woo!
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
People are really looking for something. I think you have to go out and really work hard.
You've sort of become like a folk hero.
There are no better builders than we have in New York, and a big percentage of that is black and minority folks, and I'm very proud of it.
I say to the African-American people that have to suffer, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it.
The black unemployment rate, the lowest in history.
1.3 million jobs, more than 1.3 million jobs added for African Americans. You talk about the First Step Act, thousands of people released from jail, 90% of them being African American.
And I want to thank our incredible president.
Funding for historically black colleges and universities. Opportunity zones, almost 9,000 of those in marginalized areas. This president has done more for African Americans in a matter of 2 to 3 years than any president in my lifetime.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump and you ain't black, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump and you ain't black, and you ain't black,
and you ain't black.
And welcome back to Black Voices for Trump Real Talk with Vernon Jones and Dennard. Gentlemen, before I get your final thoughts, I just wanted to remind everyone at home that we are in a fight to continue to bring prosperity and opportunity to Black Americans. So here are some ways that you can get involved. You can download our brand new Trump 2020 campaign app. It's available on Apple and Android. You can go to armyfortrump.com to also join the fight by attending trainings, hosting MAGA meetups, and helping with phone banking. And as always, text WOKE to 88022 to join our Black Voices for Trump coalition. And to stay in touch with the campaign, text Trump to 88022. And now, back to our guests for final comments. Paris, let's start with you.
You know, Katrina, it's been an honor to be with you and Representative Jones tonight. Yesterday, you know, the both of us had the tremendous honor to be with the President of the United States in the West Wing. And what I will just say that struck me about that meeting was that the President understands the moment. The President knows that it is a time for action, it is a time for leadership, and it is a time for him to be the president that he was exactly elected to be. He gets it. He understands the protest. He understands the cries of the small business owners. He understands the community's need for someone to help. And he knows that Democrat leaders have failed them for many, many years, as they're failing them now to provide law and order while their businesses burn. I was so touched by the fact that the president wanted to listen, but more importantly, that he wanted to have action, and he was ready to lead and to continue to lead because his agenda has never stopped for our community. And so as we move into this election season even more, the contrast has never been clearer. While Joe Biden was trying to lead from behind from his basement in quarantine, President Trump has been there consistently leading for the Black community and all of Americans by putting us first. It was a great day. And today I'm honored again to be with you all.
Yeah, you know, I have to admit that that was a very enlightening meeting just to see how committed that the president is to all Americans and how really it's all about the solutions. And yes, unfortunately, many of the solutions that, you know, are being rioted about right now are state and local solutions.
100%.
So, you know, I'm just proud that we have a president who has offered, you know, his full resources, the full extent of federal resources to these state and local communities to help heal their communities. So you're right. We have the right leader for the right time. And hopefully other leaders can look at this example and do what's right for the Americans that they are supposed to be serving as their front line of defense. So Representative Jones, do you have any final thoughts for this evening?
Well, first of all, I too want to say thank you for letting me be a part of this instrumental body in helping Donald J. Trump get reelected. You have some fine quality people working very hard for this president. So I want to thank everybody out there, and certainly Paris, my first time having an opportunity to share a platform with you, and I'm a big follower, big fan of yours as well as Katrina's. You guys know that. This is a very serious election, and I know we always hear people say this is the election of a lifetime, but this really is the election of a lifetime. Donald J. Trump has done more in 3.5 years than most presidents have done my entire lifetime. Nobody can disagree that prior to the pandemic, that the economy was humming. Record numbers of unemployment, record numbers of small businesses getting started, record numbers of other businesses growing and expanding their businesses. People's pension and all the other investments were rising on the increase. You were making money. Those folks who never had a job or have been out of the job market for a long time, they were able to get jobs and start providing for their families. Taxes were cut. Those who had offshore accounts were able to bring money back here and not be over penalized, so they can invest those dollars and help renew America and help grow America. This president has taken a national and international stand. He has called on all those foreign countries who have taken advantage of these United States for many, many years, even though our past presidents have acknowledged that we're being taken advantage of. They didn't do a thing about it. This president stood up to all of them, the bullies, those who were just straggle-ons, and those who didn't have any leadership. He has started to lead the world stage. And you know what? They know that this president is going to put America first. No longer are going to get these deals where America is going to be taken advantage of. I look at the farmers, and I'm a farm boy. What this president has done for agriculture and helping our farmers so they can pass along their farms to their children and their grandchildren. I look at manufacturing jobs that were lost that are now being brought back due to this president when the previous administration said no more manufacturing jobs. Small America, rural America, inner cities, urban America. There's not a place, there's not a country, there's not an individual that have not been impacted on a positive way by what this president has done in the past just 3.5 years. Now, can you imagine letting him finish the job and let him put America even farther ahead? And he's definitely going to leave it better than he found it. And so I ask everyone out there, blacks, I know you may feel, to my friends and colleagues who may be African Americans, I know you feel like, how can you be black and support this president? Well, if you set aside the D's and set aside the R's, because if you ask me, how can I not support this? How can I support this president? He's Republican. How can you support those Democrats? You've been voting all your life for Democrats, and all they've done was hurt you and kept you where they want you, dependent on them. Put D's and R's to the side and just look at how your life was prior to the pandemic. If you were living a great life and you had a job, you had opportunities, and your family was doing well, then there should be no problem voting for Donald J. Trump. But if you're being intimidated or you're being psyched out and you think that, okay, well, they'll get it right for us this time, they are not going to get it right for you. The Democrats do not have an agenda for African Americans. They have it for others, but not for African Americans. This president's good for America. This president's good for each and every community. And I ask everybody to join me in electing, or I should say re-electing, Donald J. Trump, President of these United States. And thank you all for having me on your show.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us on Real Talk tonight. And thank you to everyone at home for tuning in. Tune in 7 nights a week for more Team Trump Online, and check our online schedule for the next Black Voices for Trump Real Talk. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.